got it going today. We got it going today. This is our last gallery talk for this fall semester, spring semester. There's not a plan yet for the summer. The university is trying to find a person who will manage the collection. There's a search going on, so that's a really good sign. But it's great you're here. I'll try not to take too much time from our presenters because you can see how much art they want to talk about. And I know that you're committed to stay for only 2 hours, correct? Okay, all right. So welcome to the Brauer Museum of Art and to our last gallery talk of the semester, featuring Professor Mike Longan and Associate Professor Ganesh Babu, both geographers from our distinguished Geography and Meteorology department. And some of those people might be trailing in. There's a faculty meeting, but then there's a faculty party. And so they'll come wobbling in and just don't pay attention to them. I'll introduce to you Bharat first. Bharat was born in India and completed his Bachelor of Science degree at Madras Presidency College. His master's degree is in applied geography at Madras University. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Madras. Before coming to the United States to complete a PhD at Indiana State University. He also earned an MBA at Purdue University Global. Bharat is a broadly trained geographer with special interest in the analysis of land environments using remotely sensed data. He has taught undergraduate students at Valparaiso University since 2006 in topics ranging from cartography, computer mapping, satellite image analysis, environmental conservation, biogeography, and globalization. In addition to his role as a teacher, Bharat is also the coordinator of the interdisciplinary environmental science program at Valpo. Bharat's scholarship is broad and deep, and his CV represents him well as a scholar you would want on your team, whether you're an economist or climatologist or biologist. His work is about the Indiana Dunes and the Holy Land. He maps snow patterns, leaf patterns, patterns of crime, and patterns of famine. As with so many of the colleagues I introduce you to, he's a wonder. Teacher, excuse me, I meant to say he's a wonderful, I just say he's a wonder. I'll stop there. He's a wonder. A great teacher, scholar, mentor, public servant, and mediator. At present, he serves as co-chair of the Education Committee of the Indiana Geographic Information Council and is editor of Midwest Social Sciences Journal. I should also add that I think this series of talks I like to think of as Bharat's idea. We were standing looking at it other. He said we should do this again for others. Mike Longan earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in Geography at the University of Colorado at Boulder, his Master's at the University of Arizona, and his PhD back at UC Boulder. Mike lists as areas of specialization geography and planning, rural geography, cultural geography, cartography, environmental geography, political ecology, economic geography, communication geography, and qualitative research. What a list. How can you just specialize in all those things? It's amazing.
We'll talk about that.
It's
We'll
amazing.
talk about that.
Yeah. But he did not list as an area of expertise the geography of country music. But that's the book he's working on and the one I want to read. Like Bharat's, Mike's scholarly interests are global and local, material and virtual, and very interdisciplinary. He served as president of the Calumet Heritage Partnership, which partnered with the Brauer to tell the region's story through art. Mike has served on every university committee, has mentored many undergraduate research projects, contributed meaningful to American studies and to Chinese and Japanese studies. He's the type of person Valparaiso University depends upon, and he goes about his work with humility and good humor. Well, maybe not good humor. With no further ado, I give you geographers Mike Longan and Bharat Ganesh Babu. Okay, so
Thank you for those introductions, and I think they presage a lot of what we're going to talk about, because what we're going to do today is we're going to use the Brauer Museum to talk about geography. And so we're not necessarily going to talk about the pieces as much as talk about how the pieces can show us something about and tell us something about geography illustrated, which is what I do, especially when I bring my classes over here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about one concept mostly, landscape, and then Bronze is going to talk about a bunch of different ideas and his biography as well. So I thought we'd start by talking a little bit about what geography is and what it's all about. And geography literally means earth writing, earth description. And so our object of study, if disciplines have an object of study, ours is the entire earth, which is a problem, right? Because the whole point of disciplines is that you study one little slice of things, but we're supposed to study the whole thing? How are we going to do that, right? It's an impossible discipline. And we require the knowledge of other disciplines. We use the knowledge of other disciplines in our work for that reason, and we often call geography the interdisciplinary discipline. So what is it that makes it a discipline? What makes it a discipline is that while we can study anything and everything from country music to clouds and biogeography, whatever it is we study, we are always studying it in relation to everything else. And so relationship is at the core of geography, and there's one concept which embodies or expresses that idea of relationship, and that is space. We think of space as emptiness, but the other way you can think about space is that space is relationship. We think about space as the relationship among things. And so space is perhaps the core concept for geography. The other way we can summarize the discipline is we're talking about relationships, is that geography is the study, the biggest kind of set of relationships on the planet Earth is the study of the relationship between humans and the environment, or humans and nature. And so that's another large area of study that geographers do. And so we often talk about geography as the study of the relationships between humans and their environment. And so I think that's where we'll kick things off here. We're going to select a painting at random, well, maybe not at random, and think about what it says to us about the relationship between humans and nature. And I think I'm going to pick this one over here. And I don't know if I'm going to get the name of the artist right.
Gary Ciadella.
Gary Ciadella. So this is in the Robertsdale neighborhood, which is up by Whiting in East Chicago. And it's a painting of a backyard.
Photograph.
A photograph. Yeah, thank you. Well, it might as well be a painting its own. I know. It's a photograph of a backyard, and at first, if you approach it, it doesn't seem to say much about nature. It's about artificiality. It's about maybe urbanness. But when you look a little closer, what have they done here? They have produced nature. They have created a natural scene out of a concrete deer, out of a cinder block pond, and out of, it looks like turf grass. I don't even know if it's real grass or artificial. I think it's probably real. But, and then some bushes, right? So this is a highly constructed, produced scene. And often in cultural geography, we talk about the production of space, not just the production of space. That space is produced. We rearrange the world, and in doing so, we alter space. So we might say we produce space, but we also produce nature. We create nature. Nature is not something that exists out there, but it's something that we actively make. And I think this painting speaks to that relationship between humans and nature in an unusual way. And we could have picked every single painting on these easels and talked about the relationship between humans and nature, which shows you why that theme is so central to geography. So I'm going to pass it off to Bharat here, and he's going to talk about his first thing.
In relation to produced nature, this is something we can relate to. Now, you'll start seeing people mowing their lawns. I have my neighbor who has perfect lawn. They probably hate me because I have dandelions. So they have manufactured this beautiful nature, and it's all about our perception of what is beautiful. To me, a dandelion is beautiful, but my neighbor hates me for that probably. So I want to start with this photograph, the steerage. I don't know anything about these things. I haven't thought much about it until the last 6 months, coming in here and talking to John. So I picked things that called to me, and I picked things that made sense to me, and went, aha, I can relate to this. And the steerage is a photograph that looks like, I saw some of you whip out your cell phones and take pictures. Nowadays we just do that. We pick it out of our pockets and take pictures. It is sort of like that. It's not remarkable. And I wanted to talk about the background of this, and I'll go off on tangent, so I'm going to read from a script that I put together. So this is Alfred Stieglitz, 1907. This was printed in 1911, but the picture was taken in 1907. Despite declining subscriptions to his quarterly journal called Camera Work, Alfred Stieglitz and his family maintained a lavish lifestyle. In June 1907, Stieglitz and his family sailed to Europe to visit relatives and friends in a first-class stateroom in the upper decks. Sometime after the third day of the travel, Stieglitz went for a walk around the ship and came upon a viewpoint that looked down towards the lower-class passengers area, known in most ships as the steerage. So it's basically the lower-class deck. It's called the steerage. And he did not have his camera with him. He raced back to his cabin to get it and quickly took this picture. And he saw that he only had one glass plate. These were times when they had to do glass plates. And Alfred Stieglitz was a pioneer in trying different techniques. So he had one glass plate left. And he took this one picture, one and only, with that one plate he had. He wrote of this scene later. On the upper deck, looking over the railing, there was a young man with a straw hat. The shape of the hat was round. He was watching the men and women and children on the lower steerage deck. A round straw hat of the funnel leaning left, the stairway leaning right, the white drawbridge with its railing made of circular chains. White suspenders crossing on the back of a man in the steerage below, round shapes of iron machinery, a mast cutting into the sky, making a triangular shape. I saw shapes related to each other. I was inspired by a picture of shapes, and underlying that, the feeling I had about life. This image has often been misrepresented as immigrants coming to America. Some critics have interpreted the returning of people who were turned away by the U.S. immigration officials and were forced to go back home. While it is possible that some passengers were those who failed to meet financial or health requirements for entrance, it is also possible that most of them were various artisans who worked in the booming construction trade of the time. This is 1907. Workers who were highly skilled in crafts such as cabinet making, woodworking, marble laying, were granted 2-year temporary visas to complete their jobs and return to their homelands when the work was complete. At first glance, without knowing this story, I too saw an American immigration story. Regardless, as a geographer, I see this as a timestamp on human movement. Human geographers describe the motivations of movements through push and pull factors. Sometimes movement of people en masse may be because of singular reasons. And our reaction to this type of movement may be informed by how we perceive different groups. However, I try to remind my students to always be cognizant of the variety of motivations that drive individual humans to disrupt their routines and move. I can relate this through my own story, which brings me to the next item, which is this painting, Mesa Land, and this is sort of etched in our imaginations, and this called to me as well. I'll tell you a story. And this image is one of the many depictions of landscapes of the American West by Edgar Payne. Landforms such as this mesa and the mesa landscapes with their red earth and the big blue skies are intertwined in our imagination of the American West. I was introduced to this landscape through a comic series called Mandrake the Magician. I don't know if anybody knows this. Mandrake the Magician. It was an American comic series. Growing up in India, I would go on my summer vacations to my grandparents' place, which was shared by my uncles, aunts, cousins. In the hot, humid mid-afternoons, there was nothing to do but go to the terrace, and there was a thatched shed, and there were many books in there that we would sift through. And I was always drawn to visuals, so I gravitated towards the bound volumes of these comic books. Mandrake the Magician, and there was another called Phantom, the Ghost Who Walks. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that stuff. But that was somebody was interested in my family, so they had a bound volume of all these, and I used to look at those. Mandrake's friend and sidekick was an African prince who was black, bald, muscular, and always wore leopard print shirts. As comically stereotypical these depictions were, I didn't know any better, and I enjoyed not only the storyline but the backdrop. And one of the backdrops was biker gangs and nefarious characters like that I absolutely had no idea about at that time. I didn't know there was some such thing as Harley Davidson. So I was also introduced to the American landscape, especially the West, just like this painting here. While I did not recognize it until much later, the beauty and the grandeur of the American Western landscape was perhaps what my pull factor was. Wanting to earn a doctorate was perhaps secondary. My very first summer as a student in the United States, I signed up for a field class and I made my way to the Grand Canyon. Now you might be wondering why I didn't move to, say, New Mexico and live there. Why Indiana? That is because I'm an environmental geographer who firmly believes that there are some places best not to be meddled with by us. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not sustainable, especially in large numbers. Some of the greatest achievements of humans, especially in America, have been the taming of the hostile environments through engineering, intense energy use, and dare I say, a fair dose of hubris and greed. About 18,000 to 12,000 years ago, near the end of the Pleistocene epoch, this region was wet. Currently, these are arid regions that cannot sustain human populations. The ongoing mega drought of more than 20 years appears to be have made this region the driest in 1,200 years. Climate models show that climate change has exacerbated this otherwise natural, normal drought. There's a reason for the big, beautiful sky and the exposed red earth. It's the climate. So with that, I will give it back to Mike.
Do you want to talk about the spatial separation of the...
You can.
Oh, okay. One thing we were talking about earlier when we were talking about this painting was the spatial separation of the classes. So we could do is, in addition to talking about push factors and pull factors, immigration, we could talk about how that's represented spatially, that these societal forces are expressed in space. as well. So we've got the rich folks up top and the less rich folks down below. Let's see, I want to continue talking about a type of space, or a way we describe space, and that is the concept of landscape. And maybe real quick, I could ask you, when I say the word landscape, what do you think of? Grass. Yes. I thought someone was going to say paintings because we're in an art gallery, but grass is a good one because what do we think of? We think of landscaping, mowing our lawn, right? That gets at what this painting's about. What else do you think of paintings? Anything else? Yeah.
Mountains and trees.
Mountains and trees, Bob Ross. Right? And we got some, well, we don't have any mountains, we got buttes. No mountains though. Mountains and trees. So landscape paintings, it's a type of representation is what we think about. Anyway, and then landscaping is a action, an activity, a thing we do. And geographers have, landscape is a key concept in cultural geography. And back in the 1920s, a geographer by the name of Carl Sauer, he was kind of fighting for the soul of geography. There was a big fight brewing, and that was between the environmental determinists, who said that nature and the environment determines human culture and controls humans. And these days, I think we would probably say it's an attractive idea, but we've sadly rejected that kind of theory for a variety of reasons. And today we follow what Sauer said, which was that he said that landscape should be the organizing concept in geography, although I guess we might disagree with that part of it. But he said that culture transforms natural landscapes into cultural landscapes. And that was the job of geographers to document the human impact of the natural landscape and how humans transform that. This kind of idea caught fire in geography, and there was a generation of cultural geographers who focused their work on describing and mapping the cultural forms in the landscape, including the founder of the Geography and Meteorology Department, Alfred Meyer, who did work on sequent occupants. His region was the Calumet region, and he traced the comings and goings of all the different groups of people through the years, up to 1950. And there's a famous block diagram that he produced, at least famous around here. One idea that emerged out of the Sauerian school of landscape studies is that one can look at ordinary landscapes for clues to culture. So we might use one of these landscapes here to think about what they tell us about culture. And we do this all the time in cultural geography. We take students outside and say, what does this landscape out here say about the culture of the people who built it, right? And I thought we could do that with one of these paintings, and I thought that this one might be a good one. And so my question to you is, what can you tell about the culture of this place and these people by looking at this landscape?
Mike, can you move the podium this way?
Yep. Any thoughts?
Looks like California.
Looks like California, I believe it is. Yeah.
I think it's about the road as much as the house. I mean, it's all about road. Yeah, a third of it is road.
It's about the road as much as the house. So this is a culture obsessed with that contraction.
Cars.
The car, yeah. It's the same color as the sky. So thinking about how we paint our cars, right? I thought, looking out these days, all the grays and reds, right? So you might say something about the time that this is. Mid-century, yeah. Anything else you see here?
Kind of Spanish colonial look in the architecture.
Yeah, so this must be Mexico or Spain, no? But it's not, it's California. So there's something to be said about, or a question to be asked, why are they copying these forms, the Spanish architectural forms?
These like spaces I'm in, because the houses are so close.
Yeah, so spaces and then, so we might be able to talk about class. This is all good. I'm glad you guys are doing the analysis. Anything else?
Middle class, pride of ownership.
pride and worship, right? I think both of these this photo and this painting, those yards are immaculate, right?
That looks like AstroTurf.
This one looks like AstroTurf? Okay. They just mowed it. Yeah.
Painted.
Yeah. There's one house on my block that looks kind of like that. That turf looks like that, but the rest of them, not so much. So that, yeah. So what the idea is, we can take an ordinary landscape and analyze it that way, and just the idea in geography, in some ways, is to value ordinary landscapes, and so that's why I brought this one up. Which this one is called Midwestern Landscape, and I don't even know.
Sinsaba.
What?
Sinsaba is his name.
Okay, Sinsaba.
Sinsaba.
And this is really a kind of ugly, ordinary landscape. It's a crossroads, it looks like. I don't even know if we can see the road going this way and a railroad crossing, right? It's a very ordinary landscape. And we know it's a landscape because of its form factor. One thing, when I said landscape, one thing you didn't think about is which way we print our pages, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so this is, the landscape is horizontal, right? That's another kind of characteristic of it. Yeah, so this is a very ordinary landscape, and one that, it says Midwest. You can probably,
And electricity.
and electricity, yeah. I
Solar
get,
farm,
what's that?
wind farm,
Is there a wind farm?
no.
Oh, but today there would be.
Today,
There would be today, yeah. It'd be a good place for one. Probably windswept. I mean, wow, yeah, it implies windiness. That sky right there. I mean, it's that sky too. I mean, well, I don't know. Midwestern sky is a little different than Western sky. Yeah. But yeah, I drive a lot across Nebraska, a lot to get back home to Colorado, so this is really familiar to me. I think, let's see, have I done enough here? Yeah, I think it's time to turn it back over to Barat. And
We have the Audubon purple record.
Yes, I do.
yeah, we gotta turn this. Oh wait,
Let me just
I'll
move that.
move that. I goofed. Wait,
Wait.
maybe
Oh, I
should-
can turn it back
Yeah,
again.
Okay, we'll turn it
Okay,
back.
you go that way.
All right, I goofed.
This is high tech. This is- Okay. Back that way. Okay, good.
All right. Go for it.
Okay,
good job, Al.
thank you. Just to continue on to, first of all, this photograph. Last time I was here, I spoke about this as well with John. The first time I came to the United States, one of the striking things going on field trips and looking at the landscape was to wonder, now I probably take it for granted, but when I was new, what struck me was all these utility poles are made of trees, right? How many millions and millions of trees were cut down for utility poles? We don't think about it because I only saw concrete poles. I never saw trees used as poles, and it tells us how much we have encroached into nature to build these manufactured new landscapes. Moving on, I'm just going to talk about something that again attracted my attention was this depiction, painting based on engraving. So this is Audubon's style, John James Audubon, and this is from the 1800s. And 1826 to 1832, it says, slightly before. And the reason it attracted me was I was just looking at some of the colonial painting in India. So if you want, you can flip through this. There are some paintings from the 1700s, and those paintings were made by local Indian artists that were commissioned by an English natural historian. Her name was Mary Impey, I-M-P-E-Y, Impey. Her husband was Elijah Impey, who was the Chief Justice of Bengal at that time. This is late 1700s. And this was they call it company art because it was East India Company that was essentially ruling this region. And luckily, amongst the conquerors, you had historians, natural history person, and she takes an interest in local avifauna and flora, and commissions artists, influences her husband to pull strings and perhaps. They have what is called an IMPI album collection now. And what a beautiful set of paintings, which were made for the purpose of natural history. And therefore, all the details are in there. And although the techniques are very different from these were paintings, Audubon in the 1800s, I see that the details and the mood, the activity that is going on, when you see these birds, it looks like they are actually going around this corn stalk. And that kind of an activity, the backdrop of the corn, all the details in the corn, you see the same style in those paintings, and the paintings are by an artist called Sheikh Zainuddin, and just amazing patience when you look at that art, and this is very similar. And the difference is this technique is of engraving, linear engraving on metal. So if you really go close and look at this, or if you find this online and zoom in, you'll see lines and details. That's because it's been engraved into metals, and I think it was Havel, that was Havel,
Yeah.
was a British colorist who would use these to reproduce multiple colored versions, and I think that this is there were 200 volumes made of the whole collection, Birds of America collection. One of them is this one, and we are really lucky in this museum to have this particular rare piece. So it was attractive to me because I had just seen through some of the colonial art from India coming from there, and I was looking at the style and how, for the purpose of natural history, if it was anything else, it was an artist observing nature, it was a completely different way you will depict it, but this is, every detail possible has been captured in these images. So for that reason, I wanted to talk about it a little bit. Go back.
Okay. It's a really interesting connection, looking at those photos, or not, paintings. I can't tell the difference, obviously.
Images.
Images.
Covers all
Images,
sins.
representations,
Yes,
which is what I
perfect.
want to talk about.
Thank
And yeah, I goofed. I was supposed to keep talking, and then, yeah, we got to turn around again.
you. Okay.
I goofed.
Okay. All right, well, I gotta pull this right out. I rehearsed this earlier.
Yeah, and I messed things up.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
There.
So, the next. So, after Carl Sauer, geographers were doing their thing for a long time, looking at ordinary landscapes, talking about cultural forms, reading them. Then along in the 1980s, late 1980s, early 1990s, when I was just getting into geography, a bunch of geographers in cultural geography got dissatisfied because geographers are out there counting barns and classifying fence post types, literally. And they said, what relevance is this to the world? Not to disparage it, but because those studies are actually really fascinating. When you go back and read them, they're really fascinating. But, you know, we got inequalities in the world and all this kind of stuff. So cultural geographers, and we got issues of racism and gender issues, and all kinds of things. So geographers were like, we need a new cultural geography. And so the study of landscape they started talking about issues of cultural and social justice. And in landscape studies, they started to talk about the relationship between landscape and power. And one geographer who was important there was a guy by the name of Dennis Cosgrove, a British geographer. And he argued that landscape was an idea or an ideology, a way of seeing the world. And that it was rooted in perspective. And that perspective wasn't innocent, but it was integral to power. And And he details in a paper in 1985, in his book as well, he details the shift from pre-perspective painting to painting with linear perspective, and how that paralleled and reinforced the development of capitalist social relations. So powerful people use landscape to signal their power, their ownership and dominion over land, because perspective places the viewer in a position of power and offers, quote, he offers us the illusion of a world in which we may participate subjectively by entering the picture frame along the perspectival axis. And so this painting here, the Steele family, which we've seen before in these talks, illustrates just exactly this. And it's just wonderful to have it here, because I can bring my students and say, see what Cosgrove said? Here's a family, and what are they doing? They're signaling their power, their ownership of land through this painting of a farm that they presumably own, right? Last time we had this painting out, we contrasted that with the painting that's back there called The Family, which has a similar composition, which I think is almost parodying this kind of a composition, which is pretty common, but it's a window instead of a painting. The other thing to note is, we're going to need the corn dance, I think, is perspective and how landscape, how perspective makes something a landscape, and how the lack of perspective might help us to talk about place. And so we might contrast any one of these paintings over here with this one called The Corn Dance, which is a very flat painting in comparison to any of these other more traditional landscapes, like the one over here. And this is, I think we are still an outsider to the scene. We're not dominating it though. I think we're in the position of the observers here. And everything's relatively flat, and there's a lot going on simultaneously. And this speaks to me as a painting about simultaneity and maybe things going on over time here. And so I thought this was a nice example of a not so perspective look at the world, which illustrates the difference between this doesn't look natural, this is meant to be natural. This gets at a feeling maybe, a place, an experience. This gets at experience, whereas these paintings over here are all about the visual. Here's what? Cowboys. Oh yeah, they got cowboy hats down there.
I'm always intrigued by this figure that is dressed as if there's a continuity here between the maize and the man, so that you have this. I mean, basically, these people thought of corn as a gift from their gods rather than a commodity. And in fact, the native peoples hybridized grasses to make corn. Corn wasn't made in the first 8 days of creation. Do you need this some more?
No, I think we're done with it. Okay.
I will.
But we're going to have to turn the thing around.
Okay.
Keep them busy.
Yeah.
1 second, please.
No problem. We'll wait. I guess I can start making my next point about landscape here. Towards the end of the new cultural geography, geographer by the name of Don Mitchell, who is the person who introduced me to landscape, the idea of landscape, and got me fascinated by it. And he's the person that inspired me to go to get a master's degree and then get a PhD. Because I was fascinated by this idea of landscape, and I want to know more. He talks about the relationship between landscape as representation, as we have here, the materiality of landscape, and about labor. That landscapes are both material, they're dirt, and they're grass, and they're concrete, and they can be representations, like here. But that these paintings are also material, And everything we see out there is also a representation, right? And I'm going to point to, and unfortunately the people online are going to have trouble seeing this because it's too close to the camera. But the maquette of this sculpture, which is on the VU campus that some of you might be familiar with, Night and Day, I think illustrates this idea, which is that landscape, this is a material object that frames a landscape, right? And so I think that plays with that idea there. But let's see. Yeah, sticking together here. Let's talk about labor, though. That landscapes, Don Mitchell has said that landscapes are both a work and that they do work. That landscapes are a product of labor, but they also do labor. And like any commodity or object, landscapes hide the labor that go into their making. So that a scene presented as a landscape in a representation is produced to appear natural. And so I think I can illustrate that with these scenes here, where we have the corn shocks, and looks like pumpkins, and here we have a scene that, unless you look at it very closely, I mean, it's kind of advantageous for me that you're far away from it. It looks natural. So one of the things that landscape as an ideological tool does is that it naturalizes things, naturalizes social relations, naturalizes the way we see the world, such that we mistake the scene for a natural scene. That we mistake this scene of agriculture for as a painting of nature, right? Because these are scenes of nature. And right, what do we have here? We got some people having a picnic. We got a little town on the horizon, and then some people on a boat, right? But we would probably classify this as a painting of nature, ignoring the social relations that it also depicts. So there's that. So one thing I do when I bring my students to museums, I challenge them to spot a landscape painting that depicts labor in a significant way. And so this is why I brought this painting up here, because a landscape with a labor in it is no longer a landscape. Maybe. Because we got one painting. It's hidden right now. I don't know if I want to show them because it contradicts my point.
Okay.
No, let's show them. Yeah, that's not a landscape. And also notice it's pretty flat, right? It's talking about the experience of labor. Yeah. We got a Thomas Hart Benton painting. Lithograph. And I haven't looked at it recently, but it was there. Yeah. So this might be a landscape. But what it does is it foregrounds the labor that made the landscape. Right? So maybe this is somewhere between a landscape and a depiction of labor.
I'll turn this way, and then I'll turn this way.
It's a really beautiful lithograph.
One thing I would point out about this is done in the 30s, I believe. And the American market had been flooded with works from Europe. And so a man got lithographic stones for people, American artists, and then they were making lithographs that you could buy at Marshall Fields or other places to try to protect the art market. But these men who are harvesting in a particular way, this was not the kind of farming that was happening during the Great Depression. I'm done. This is anachronistic.
All right. Yeah. So it's an idealized scene.
Yes.
Interesting.
It idealizes hand labor when, of course, it was tractors and reapers and what have you.
Of course, that's what the Tom Hartman did.
Yeah.
There's a famous, to connect this out to my other interest, country music, there's a famous painting.
Just walking around. Oh.
Yeah. There's a famous painting in the Country Hall of Fame that was commissioned by them. It was his last painting depicting the roots of country music, which helps to set up the myth of that. So we ran out of easels. I could keep going.
I don't want to.
But yeah,
Since
you want to keep
switched
going?
a little bit, I missed something.
You missed something. Go for it.
I saw this in the description in the Brauer Museum book that has the collection and the description. Here's the description of this one. It says the grackle is especially appealing subject to the Midwest for Midwesterners. Not only is it native to the area, it provided the only way of controlling cornworm at that time. So I want to ask you, all of you are from Northwest Indiana, how many of you have seen a grackle? Here in Northwest Indiana, purple grackle. I have seen a grackle only when I kind of go to Kentucky, maybe you start seeing grackles. So I don't know what the description means by Midwesterners, but this is a point when, as geographers, we try to describe region or categorize regions. Apparently, Minnesotans don't want to be called Midwesterners.
I do.
But that's, I mean, regions as, you know, what is a region? How do we define it? These are the kinds of questions that we grapple with as geographers. And this one sentence about the grackle, as a biogeographer, we look at ranges and where the abundance starts. And you'll see grackles getting more abundant as you go more southward than up here. Perhaps there will be some migration soon because of climate change, but it is very interesting how, or I don't know if there was a range reduction since, or change of range since when the painting was done, but I'm sure the description was written much
Recently.
recently.
Yeah. He
So-
probably wrote it.
So anyway, the question of region, how we describe ourselves, was interesting when I was looking at the description of this particular painting. Just wanted to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we just open it up for now, since we could talk forever. We could just keep going. Yeah.
When you were talking about the cement here and how they were making nature, it reminded me of the airline cell tower in Babu that's disguised as a tree.
Where's that? A new cell tower in Valpo disguised as a tree? Where's that?
It's on North Campbell, just past the high school on the east side. Do you know where the dog park is? If you look down the road, you're going to turn to the dog park. You'll see it right there.
Okay.
And it's
That huge artificial tree?
it's a cell tower, but it looks like a pine tree.
Yeah.
Crazy.
What-
Anyway, this reminded me of making nature out of
Yeah.
a cell tower or out of cement. So.
I often when I take my students out, I ask them what do you see? And then I gesture wildly towards an ugly regular cell tower or electrical box, and they say grass, trees, whatever, and they ignore those things. So it's interesting that, the tree, it's supposed to blend in, but maybe it doesn't blend in so much.
Well,
Did you notice it?
when you look at it, you'll immediately know what I mean.
Yeah.
You'll immediately see it, but
It looks
you
like a red,
probably
it looks like a
looked at it a
redwood.
lot and not noticed it.
Okay, yeah.
Looks like a redwood.
A giant,
Mhm.
yeah.
You thought it was real?
Oh,
no. Yeah.
That makes me think about, there's a smokestack between here and Chicago that they've painted sky blue.
Smokestacks between here and Chicago,
Yeah,
that they painted
yeah,
sky
and-
blue.
Yeah, so you can tell they're attempting to make it not look so encroaching on the land, but, you know,
Yeah.
I think they'll probably spewing the same stuff.
If you look at utility boxes, they have a particular shade of green,
Oh.
and the green is called